I wanted to say thank you for this opportunity to speak with all of you. I'm very happy about that. And I try to infuse my curatorial practice with my personal commitment to social and racial justice. And today I'm going to highlight 5 issues that I'm really, 5 key issues that I'm working on right now. So that's my title slide. You can find me online in a lot of digital spaces as Art Stuff Matters. So yeah, I worked as a curatorial fellow at Yale University Art Gallery for 3 years. And one of the things I noticed is faculty use the collection a lot, probably something similar here at Blanton. And in photography, I noticed people would ask for photos mainly by white male photographers over and over again. And I kept thinking, what is this? You know, there are other people who make pictures. And part of that was just what people know, what they're used to, what they were familiar with. And if they did ask for images by women, it would usually be 5 women and they would be 5 white women. So I worked with a student and we collaborated with the library at Yale, the Haas Library for Art. They were doing a Wikipedia edit-thon, and it was to put a focus on, we looked at and tried to, as problematic as it is, to identify people who identify as women that we have in our collection of artists. And then we put a focus on trying to highlight writing more material, getting stuff on Wikipedia about those artists, and then putting that list together, and then we shared that list with faculty, and whenever people would consult and they would tell me what themes they were interested in, I would kind of mention some other artists that they could also show in their class. And over again, a lot of people thanked me for that information and told me they just were not aware of these other artists. So that was one thing that we did. I wrote about Carrie Mae Weems when I did the Wikipedia edit-thon, and she actually responded on Twitter. She thanked me for adding to her page, which I was really excited about. Another thing I noticed is Native American art. People sometimes, professors would want to see certain images of Native American, talking about Native American topics for their course. And I've learned very quickly that we did not have any photography in our collection by Native American photographers. So Native Americans would be featured as subjects, but they would not be the producers of the images. And of course, then I started thinking about my own training in photography and realized that I had not studied any photography by Native Americans either. And so this was an opportunity for me to go back and think and learn about photographers, Native American photographers, and consult with people on the faculty there. And we did try to push for certain objects to be, you know, for us to acquire. But if you work in a museum, you do know that that's a long kind of process. And I was a curatorial fellow. I wasn't the curator of photography. At that time, they didn't have one. And they wanted to wait till they had someone in place. So we never did get any pictures by Native American photographers, but I did try to contextualize images I would put up. Often people ask for Edward Curtis's photographs, if you know about them. You know, I mean, in a way they're important images, but they're highly problematic and they connect with a lot of like very, very racist history that we have, genocide. So I would try to offer that information. I didn't know about this artist that I'm showing you, Wendy Red Star. I think this is an amazing series of photographs. I just learned about her a couple weeks ago when I was at Brooklyn Museum in New York, and I realized she's doing this kind of annotation method where she's appropriated these photographs by, this is a white male photographer, I believe, and she's adding information about the Native subjects. And so I thought this was an important thing that I wish I had known about, because it would have been another way to try to bring in information, even if it's through reproductions, through books, video, all of these kind of materials I feel like are ways that we can push against the biases that we inherit with our collections. Because often people say, well, that's the collection and we have, you know, we don't have the money to buy things, if a donor's not going to give us something else, we just have to work with this. There has to be ways that we can push and challenge those kind of inherent, limited, the racism that we just inherit. Otherwise, we're just perpetuating that system. So, the shirt I'm wearing, and as you can see, a lot of people have bought these shirts. Museums Are Not Neutral came about last year in August 2017. I co-created this campaign with a friend. We're on these social media spaces quite a bit. Twitter is actually a big one for me, where I collaborate with a lot of folks through that. And he had written something about his frustration. He's Mike Moralski. He is the director of education and public programs at the Portland Art Museum in Oregon. So he's someone I followed for years, and we would often connect through these social media spaces. He had written something about basically saying museums are not neutral, and I thought, oh, that's great, that should be on a T-shirt, because I'm one of these statement T-shirt people. And we thought, let's make it a point, let's make a real statement to do this. And basically, it's just to refuse that, to make a really strong statement of no, because I heard it over and over from people. When I was at Yale, people kept telling me things that I was proposing were too political, that the museum had to be neutral, and I thought, are you out of your mind? The museum is inherently a political construct. It comes out of colonialist enterprise, so it's already political. And the fact that I was often the only person of color in a meeting for years means that it's not a neutral situation. It was always political. So I basically am not taking that from anybody anymore. If you want to try to bring it, do it. Go for it. So this is our campaign. And we don't make any of the money. I mean, I bought shirts. I bought a lot of these shirts myself. I have them in a lot of colors because now it's a uniform for me. And the money goes to different charitable organizations. When we first started, for a few months or several months, the money all went to Southern Poverty Law Center. Then we did World Kitchen Collective to help out with feeding people from Hurricane Maria, which unfortunately people are still suffering the effects of that. And now we're focused on an organization in Flint called the Community Foundation of Health, I believe, and it's helping with long-term health damages that children who have been affected from the water in Flint. And I'm very, very proud of this initiative. It was something that really kind of came about as, a conversation, and it is something that we've sold over 1,200 shirts. We've raised $13,000 for charity. And it is also part of a real conversation that's happening, and it's encouraging people to speak up in their institutions. And we see it, like we talk to a lot of people who work in museums, but it's also to encourage other people who don't work there, who are visitors, or people who hate museums because they see them as very racist spaces. I really want to encourage people to push institutions to see these as their spaces. They do not belong to the people who work in the museum. The museum, we're the people who are caretakers of the objects, but we don't own the objects. They belong to everybody. You can find things about the conversation. You can find them if you're on Twitter, the hashtag museums are not neutral. That's an ongoing discussion. There's just so much stuff is on there. I follow it. Sometimes I don't even respond to all of them, but I do. When people say little things, I sometimes write back. But it's ongoing, and it's really global. It's a lot of folks here in the U.S., but also throughout Europe, South America, Australia. So a lot of people are following this hashtag now and have these shirts all over the place. So social justice in museums resource list is something I started back in 2015 to make kind of a bibliography, to make this information just out there for the world. So it's basically an open Google Doc. Any of you, all your friends, whoever, everybody is welcome to review it, to share it with friends, to add to it. I go on and try to keep checking and editing and cleaning it up because sometimes people, things get a little messy in there. And I have a lot of copies of this in case somebody was going to be horrible and try to delete it. But so there is a safety net with it. It's over 40 pages long. It's a lot of stuff. A lot of things should be on here that aren't on there. There's a focus on, as you can see, activism in museums. There's a focus on diversity, inclusion, that kind of language, which sometimes I actually find very problematic. But the general concepts seem okay. There's articles that you can find about that, decolonization, just a real range of things, case studies from things that have happened in different institutional controversies and so forth. The Art of Black Dissent. This is something I'm very proud of. This is something I started in 2015, the discussions for it. This is actually one of the best things I've done in my entire life. And I think it's great, but it also makes me just kind of horrified about what I'm doing with my life. God, I should be doing better things. So this is a dialogue program that I started with a friend, my friend Gabriella Svenningsson. She still works at Yale University Art Gallery, where we work together, and both in the photography department. And basically it became something where, in 2014, like probably many of you, I watched so many black people die, and I saw it on social media, and it was horrifying. And in December later that year, there was a group of colleagues of people who work in museums who, excuse me, I have allergies. There were a group of people who work in museums who basically said, you know, more people in museums should be doing something instead of just like all of this stuff is happening in the world and there's nothing happening in museums. We're not making any kind of statement. I came up with this idea, and it took a long time to get it going. Basically, we had a lot of pushback where people felt that it was too political to talk about race in the gallery, which again was ridiculous. At that point were focused on objects from the collection, and we had very good response. I think some people were afraid that people were going to be angry. All kinds of fears basically were stymieing the whole progress of doing this. We were only really able to do it once there were a series of protests that happened on campus at Yale also in 2015. As soon as that happened and made national news, I was invited to do the program. The program happened in 2016, one public program, but we did it several times for classes, so for 5 or 6 times for classes at Yale. And then we had such a good response that my friend and I, Gabrielle and I, decided to seek grant funding and bring this out into the public. So we go to high schools and to libraries, and now we use our own set of art, so we don't have any Glenn Ligons and stuff and Adrian Pipers, because I don't have money. But we have our own collection. We have a lot of zines and stuff. I like that you were showing that, artist books and stuff like that. So I'm going to try to go quickly because I have only a few more seconds, and I want to really highlight this. I think there are really important steps that we can all take as individuals, individual steps. And I will be happy to share this slide with you in case I push the button too quickly and you're not able to write these things down. But a lot of it is about educating yourselves. All of us, unfortunately, I mean, I would say a lot of us, I don't know myself for sure, as good as our educations have been, you can go to school and get all this advanced training and yet still not know so much because our schools, I mean, all of this stuff is just entrenched with racism. Let's see, I didn't meet my own clock. Okay. So a lot of it is about educating yourself. I think we should all try to break out and really think like artists, to not try to follow established conventions, to really think about building collaborations with folks. And let me see what else I want to really say. Oh, critical praxis. We really got to get into more kind of a critique, thinking about what you're doing, using that critical thinking skills, and really the people in the museum should be doing that about their own work, and thinking about really challenging established structures, and getting out and telling your story and publishing it. It's really one of the main strengths we have is to tell the truth, and it really doesn't happen that much in museums. Then there's what we can do as an institution. There's an intersectional, anti-racism, kind of anti-oppression set of steps that we can do. So diversity fellowships is a really big, important thing, and often that's where people kind of stop with their conversation. It's like, hey, you know, that's it. We need to get more people of color in these museums. That is a good thing. That is important. And there's all these other things we can be doing, looking at our hiring practices, talk about staff training, because really the culture in a lot of these institutions, it is a very racist culture that's it's just embedded within the institution. So to create kind of spaces where people will want to work, that are people of color, that's important to really, to break things apart. Creating productive mentorship opportunities, changing your mission statements, making it actually important to your mission. That rarely happens. And the big one that's actually couched here in the middle but should probably be at the top is funding criteria. Because we're really not talking about anything if we're talking about trying to change and really do anti-oppression, anti-racism. If you're not really making that part of a funding criteria, it's not going to happen. It can't just be on the goodwill of folks. So there's some other really wonderful things. Of course, teaching next generations. That's one of the great things that museums are not neutral. We've been invited to go out and talk with college campuses to museum studies courses, public humanities, things like that. And I actually really love that because I feel like that's the next people coming up in the field, and it's a really important kind of space to be in. And of course, adopting more community-centered approaches to our work. Thank you.